You guys have a question you can ask me in a minute?
Yeah. You may have revealed it already, I might just not have been paying attention, but are we ever going to find out where they got the power from in Chronicle?
I can tell you where they got the power from in my movie.
Yeah, I would love to hear it.
Okay.
That takes more than 5 minutes. That thing in the cave.
No.
Moga? I had this idea very early on that whatever gave them their power in Chronicle should be something that is ultimately kind of mundane. And it shouldn't be aliens, because aliens are dumb. That's how everyone gets their powers. It shouldn't be the government, because that's dumb too. It should be something that you just never think. So, massive, omnivorous, geodesic organism. In the Archaean Age, when there was lava all over everything, and the Earth had no surface, there were giant organisms, sometimes as big as a half-mile wide, that were essentially just crystalline rock formations. They couldn't think, really. They were almost like a form of algae. They were massive. And the way they would move and propel themselves through the lava was electromagnets. So these things never died out. But during the Archaean Age, we found remains of them over the years, but we can't identify what they are. They look like rock formations. You can't tell that they were alive ones unless you look and you dissect it. But so these things, as the Earth crust got formed, got moved further and further and further and closer to the core of the Earth that we know almost nothing about. So they're they're not even endangered. They're hundreds of millions of these giant crystalline organisms living near the center of the Earth. Now, they don't really need to feed much, but because they're from the Archaean Age, when protein was everywhere in minerals, they still sort of are omnivorous. They eat plants and meat. They don't eat rocks. So to feed, there's none of that down the bottom of the Earth. They burrow tunnels up to the surface using electromagnetic manipulation. Once they're there, they burrow a tunnel up. It's usually at the bottom of the ocean, although it happened once in a place called Roanoke, Virginia, and it didn't turn out well for the people there. And it's happened a couple of times. It happened, one of them broke Earth at a place called Roswell, New Mexico, before dying of old age and crashing to the ground. In fact, almost every incidence of UFO, supernatural, or paranormal events can be tied back to these things that live near the center of the Earth. They're animals. They can't really do anything. They're like big dumb crystals, and the way they eat is they burrow a hole up to the surface, and they put out sort of this radio wave that mammals and higher life forms hear, usually fish, because they're at the bottom of the ocean. And 3 humans heard one of them. The humans in Chronicle are then drawn to the hole. You go into the hole, and it turns you into a telekinetic drone. You can then manipulate electromagnetic fields, which would allow you to move anything, although it would cause intense strain on your brain, nosebleeds. But you're essentially a drone, and your job is to go and collect food, and you're connected to the other drones, except for the one in Chronicle was very, very old and very, very sick, and it died during the drone making process. And 3 kids ended up with telekinesis, who should have just been absorbed by this thing at the end of its feeding period. And they ended up with telekinesis, and things went pretty shitty for them. And we never find this out we don't find it out in Chronicle 2, although we see it all dug up. But in my fan fiction for my own thing, in Chronicle 3, another one of them shows up and gets an entire town of people. Except for, if an entire town of people were drones, it's now World War Z is out, so it's not as cool. But can you imagine a swarm of flying humans? Flying zombies? So it was sort of the idea that Matt in the 3rd movie would have to contend with another one of these things having come up. It's the one that killed the one in the 1st movie. We do the Star Wars thing, where in the 1st sequel, you deal with all these other problems, and then in the 3rd movie, you deal with the Death Star again. I wanted to do that again. And Spider-Man sort of did that too, but they couldn't decide if they wanted to do Green Goblin or Venom. But I thought it was a really cool idea. It led to a lot of very cool concept art, but who knows what Chronicle 2 and 3 are now, so I couldn't tell you. But that's what I made up for the thing. And I made it up because no one would ever fucking guess that. And by the way, everything I just said is a lie. These creatures never existed. Nothing like this has ever existed on planet Earth. But I thought, wouldn't it be really funny if, during a Chronicle, we were like getting hustled through a hallway by a government guy, and someone was like, "What's the thing in the cave?" And he goes, "Okay, during the Arcane Age," and he's like trying to tell you this really quickly as other shit is happening, and you realize, oh, what was in the hole doesn't fucking matter. All that matters is what happened to Andrew, what happened to Steve, and what happened to Matt, and all of that sucked. That's what was in the hole in Chronicle. According to me, although now I'm just a fan of Chronicle, so who knows.